And we are back with another episode of the Kyle Lanslone Show. And returning today is the great Larry Johnson. He, of course, former CIA, and now Sonar 21 is the website. He does great writing there. And of course, you can find him all over YouTube. He's always on with, the greats, Judge Napolitano and Danny Davis. Larry, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm well, Kyle. Thank you for your very generous, kind praise. I just like to think of myself, old guy with an opinion.
Well, those opinions are usually very good and insightful, and especially in this era that we are living in right now with Donald Trump and seeming to be on the brink of war around the world. So, of course, a lot I want to talk to you about today, the Iran talks. Will we see the war with Iran start this week? Tucker destroys Huckabee and Trump's war budget. So I want to start off. I was watching the Intelligence Community Roundtable last week with Judge Napolitano, was you, Ray McGovern, and John Kiriakou. And this is something you had to say. I was hoping you could expand on.
Sure. How could this be a serious negotiation when the negotiators are Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner,
right?
Both avowed Zionists, number one. And then how was it conducted? Well, they had it in Geneva. So here's Witkoff and Kushner. First, they're in there they're watching the Russians and Ukrainians, and they're part of that negotiations. And hey, guys, time out. And they run into another room. Okay, they talk to the Omanis, who's playing as an intermediate. They don't directly talk to the Iranians. I mean, if this was a serious process, they'd be talking directly to the Iranians, and they would actually send a negotiating team that was staffed with some people that had some expertise. But, they went in and said back and forth with the Omanis, and then they run back into with the Ukrainians and Russians. And then that's not serious negotiation. This is amateur hour.
So, Larry, I'm just really curious as what are the actual U.S. positions on what are we asking from the Iranians right now, and what are we willing to give in exchange?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. So, if you talk to Bibi Netanyahu, the administration has signed on to 4 demands that guarantee that they're not building a nuclear weapon. No enrichment of uranium, eliminate all their ballistic missiles that can travel beyond 300 miles, and end all support for Hamas and Hezbollah. Iran has been very clear that they're not going to Hamas and Hezbollah. Prerogative. Number 2, they're not going to give up their ballistic missiles. They realize that's their only card they hold for defending themselves. They're not going to completely give up enrichment, but they'll talk about it and get enrichment at a level that will be able to satisfy the West, that they're not creating enough fissile material that can then be converted into a warhead. And with respect to guarantees not to build a nuke, they've already said they're not building a nuke, but we'll put together an inspection procedure, whatever. So that leaves right now, if Trump wants a deal, he can get a deal where he can walk away and say, I have convinced the Iranians not to build a nuclear weapon. He'll be claiming victory over something that was already their position, but, so be it. And the Iranians reportedly have shown even more flexibility about trying to come up with some system. They're a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but they're willing to make some concessions apparently on that front, just to get the sanctions lifted and get back into the normal routine of international economic trade and commerce. So we'll see if Trump is going to accept that. Now, basically, he'll be accepting a watered-down version of the JCPOA from 6 years ago. But it beats the alternative of going to war, because if we decide to attack Iran, the United States is going to suffer a humiliating defeat, I believe. And that defeat will bring an end to the Trump presidency. So I don't think he knows what. I think he's he's trying to make a bet that is terribly risky and no guarantee of success. And we had just learned from the New York Times that yesterday, both Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and John Ratcliffe, the director of the CIA, both told Donald Trump they could not give him any guarantee of quick victory, and that they couldn't guarantee that there would not be potentially significant casualties. So based on that, so far, Trump, I think, is like going, maybe I don't want to do this.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you more about Trump's negotiating team. Donald Trump presents himself as the ultimate deal maker, right? It's the art of the deal. He's going to get the best bargain for Americans at every possible turn. He's done it with his tariffs. This is the line from the administration. So we're sending Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff over there. What would it actually look like if the U.S. was trying to get a deal done with Iran? What kind of people would we need to be sending? What kind of talks would we need to be engaging in? And also, what kind of timeline would we be looking at?
Well, you would send somebody that clearly has some professional experience. I mean, you got to have a figurehead. So whether it's Marco Rubio or even Witkoff, but Witkoff must be accompanied by a State Department diplomat that speaks Farsi, that understands Iran, that knows the history, that knows not just the language but the culture. But what they're getting right now, all this, it's a mediation without any direct face to face. So there's no chance for each side to get to know the other, which is can be very important in these kinds of negotiations. It is, the fact that Witkoff and Kushner were dealing with two radically different issues. One, the Ukraine-Russian war, and then this attempt to, get rid of Iran's nuclear program. You got to have one person to focus on one of those issues, not two. And that was the problem with it. So, the Iranians still remain hopeful that a negotiated deal is on the table. You and I were talking offline before we came on air about the news that's out in the Washington Post, talking to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, and it's interesting that I'd forgotten about this, but he's Air Force, and there's another senior Air Force four-star, who's also on the JCS representing the Air Force. You got an Air Force heavy Joint Chiefs of Staff, and apparently Kane was telling Trump, we can't give you the guarantees that this is going to be easy or successful like we did with Venezuela, for example, or Operation Midnight Hammer, just a one-night bombing run back on June 24th, and which is, I took heart from that at least now somebody's being honest with him, as opposed to indulging these fantasies that, we got the biggest, best military in the world and nobody can stop us.
Yeah, so Chris, maybe we could go to this tweet from the Washington Post, John Hudson, and I think this was the initial report about what Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Crane, expressed to Donald Trump. Now, Larry, my first question is, he is saying that the U.S. weapons stockpile is basically so depleted that it's going to limit what the United States could do in Iran. But we have the largest military budget in the world. We spend more than the next 10 countries combined. So I think to the average American, it just sounds entirely unbelievable that our weapons stockpile could be this low. Is this actually a real issue that the U.S. military is facing?
Oh, absolutely, particularly on the Patriot missiles. And let's start with the embargo that China has placed on rare earth minerals coming to the United States for military purposes. The Patriot missile needs some of those rare earth minerals in order to produce it. already, even before that became an issue, the United States, I think Lockheed Martin was the contractor that won the rights to produce those missiles, was producing 700 a year. And people say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, 700 a year equates that if you realize you got to fire 2 of those missiles at a minimum for every inbound missile that, say, Russia or Iran is firing. Well, that means you could absorb 350 attacks. On one night, just one night in Ukraine, Russia launched over 700 missiles and drones in one night. If Ukraine had tried to intercept all of those, they would have come immediately in one night, depleted their entire store of Patriot missiles, and it would have been equivalent of one, actually, not, if they fired 700, that means you needed 1,400 Patriot missiles. That's 2 years worth of production. That's what Kane is admitting to. We no longer have the industrial spine to crank out in large volumes the weapon systems like Russia does. Russia has it. We don't.
Yeah. And so this is, I think, really maybe the most important thing, especially when you're talking about modern warfare, which it seems to be, these aerial defense systems, these missile defense systems are essentially the backbone,
Right.
or at least a part of the American military. If not, our aircraft carriers are just giant sitting buses out in the middle of the ocean. Our bases are stationary targets, very easy for the Iranians to hit. We really rely on being able to shoot down not just the Iranian missiles and drones targeting the U.S., but also the state of Israel. And it just seems inconceivable to me. I believe after the 12-day war in June, there was reports that the U.S. had used 12% of its total stockpile of the THAAD interceptor, not 12, 25% of its total global stockpile of the THAAD interceptors. Well, these are the ones that shoot down the big missiles that I think are the ones highest they could intercept above orbit, right? So I'm not sure what the plan is here, but if we're going to war and we don't have these interceptors, then are we talking about massive losses for American soldiers in the region in the event of a conflict?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the survey, the White House 3 days ago was presented with the survey. One of the questions on it was whether or not Americans are willing to accept 10,000 casualties. And we're not talking in a year or 2 year war. We're talking in a war that's going to last weeks. And the answer is no, they're not. That's what they face potentially. The level of pushback by Iran is significant, and we continue to claim that they've been decimated and that they're weak. A lot of people have lost fights by underestimating their opponents, and I always advocate assume the worst. And then if the worst doesn't show up, you're in great shape. But if the worst does show up, you're prepared. And the United States is just the opposite. We don't prepare, and we assume the best. And that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, while we're talking about the casualties, one story I saw over the weekend that raised some of my alarms that maybe the administration is really thinking about an extended conflict with Iran that's going to involve U.S. casualties is Trump is sending one of the 2 U.S. hospital ships and he says to Greenland.
Yeah.
And I saw Daniel Davis on that pointed out that, if you look at the geography, if you want to get this ship closer to Europe, without raising any red flags that it's going to Europe, you would say we're sending it to Greenland. So do you think this could possibly be more about American troop casualties in the Middle East versus treating the Greenlanders?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure the Mercy or the Comfort, it's one of those, is set up to deal with frostbite. Okay? That's what you're going to get this time of the year in Greenland. But this is... let me put it this way. If we're looking at it strictly in terms of the combat air power the United States has deployed into the Middle East, the last time we did anything close to this was in February of 2003 before we launched the war in Iraq in March of 2003. So this really is unprecedented. And it means we've got assets that are they're armed, they're locked, they're ready to go. They're just waiting for the order. So far, the order has not come. And I believe, there's a combination of reasons. One was this meeting yesterday at the White House, where they had reconvened and they got an even stronger assessment, apparently, from not just Joint Chiefs Chairman Kane, but also apparently John Ratcliffe, the CIA. They couldn't give Trump the assurance that, this can be a cakewalk and they're going to be praising you. They said, no, this has got a lot of dangers, and there's a real risk that you will be blamed from when this goes wrong. And that's the last thing Trump wants is any blame. Then you had the, Tucker Carlson's interview with Mike Huckabee. And Huckabee, boy, did he step into it, because he made the claim that it would be okay for Israel to take over all of the land from the Nile River to the Euphrates, which means you'd take over Jordan, you'd take over parts of Syria, parts of Lebanon.
So, Larry, we actually have that clip queued up and ready to go. So let's roll it, and then I'll get your response.
Yeah.
Christian Zionism. I want to go back because that's where we started.
I'm not going to let you off on this because you have said it 3 times that God gave this land to this people. And so it is entirely fair for me, with respect, to ask, what land are you talking about? Because I just read Genesis 15, as I have many times. Mm-hmm. And that land, I think it says, from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is, once again, basically the entire Middle East. So God gave that land to his people, the Jews, or he didn't. You're saying he did. What does that mean? Does Israel have the right to that land? Because you're appealing to Genesis.
Yeah.
You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all.
I can't watch that and not laugh. So, Larry, go ahead. Continue with your point.
Well, when he said that, he did something that nobody else in the Middle East has been able to do. He brought Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates together. In the day preceding this, Saudis were looking at potentially going to war with the United Arab Emirates. With that one comment, Huckabee achieved getting Egypt, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Indonesia, the Gulf Cooperation Council, the International Association of Pissed Off Muslims, they all, man, livid. If the intensity of the words in that piece could have been harnessed into like a reactor, man, you would have lit up New York City for at least 2 or 3 months.
I'm wondering, because I did see a report, I think it was in the New York Times, that this may actually get in the way of the plans to bomb Iran.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that these countries are all so enraged about what Mike Huckabee said that, and of course, our planes are going to be flying out of air bases in all these countries to go to war with Iran. So,
actually,
does this have a meaningful impact on that?
Yeah, not all of them, but the principal ones are Jordan and Saudi Arabia, with a little bit from Kuwait. Oh my goodness, because Jordan up to this point was seen as the U.S. prison bitch, the one that would do whatever it was told. And in fact, there's some reports today that the Jordanian military. I just got a note from a friend who's a retired senior U.S. military officer, and he was pointing out that Huckabee's comments did not go over well with the Jordanian military, and they're looking hard at maybe even ousting the king of Jordan because he's seen as too much of a toady for the United States and Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this if in light of that, Saudi Arabia and Jordan very well may have told Trump, yeah, you're going to get your planes out of our territory. We're not going to support this anymore.
Right. And particularly Jordanian airspace has been absolutely crucial in the air wars, with the missiles and drones after the Iranians responded following the Israeli bombing of their embassy in Damascus. And then during the 12-day war in June, a lot of Iranian drones were shot down, some by the Jordanian Air Force,
right,
in the skies above Jordan. This country is absolutely crucial to protecting Israel from Iran. And here we have our ambassador to Israel, who is there doing the best, Netanyahu, Bezalel Smotrich impression he can, right? He's trying to advance the interests of the state of Israel, and actually may have been so blunt about it that I got set back a little bit. Almost funny. I did want to ask you, I saw today the Fox News had reported that the State Department ordered the evacuation of non-emergency personnel from the embassy in Beirut. Reuters is reporting that the U.S. has begun the process of withdrawing from its largest military base in Syria. So this seems to me to be the U.S. moving around its assets in the Middle East because we are going to war with Iran and we are about ready to strike. Larry, do we see a U.S. attack on Iran this week or in the coming month?
You will know it's getting ready to happen when all of the embassies in the region are told to draw down non-essential personnel, and the notice to airmen, the NOTAM, is issued about flights in and out of Iran. So far, we don't have those two things. So we're not going to, it's highly unlikely that we would see any military attack on Iran until those two things happen. We do, though, have everything else. Think of it this way. You got the young couple waiting to go to prom. They got the prom outfits on, the suit, the party dress. They've each got the flowers on. They're all ready to go. They're just waiting for the limo to show up. The limo hasn't shown up yet, but as soon as the limo gets there, then party's on. And so if you start seeing countries like Jordan, Turkey, Lebanon, or any Qatar, Dubai, start to say, okay, no more flights here. We're gonna start cutting back flights. No, that tells you it's near. That's the final warning sign.
Well, I will definitely be keeping an eye out for that warning sign as we progress through the week. I do have one more clip of Tucker's interview with Mike Huckabee here that I thought was too good to not play on the show.
Jonathan Pollard did something that was terribly wrong. He sold secrets. He shouldn't have done it. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and spent 30. Actually, I think he was sentenced to maybe more than 30 years, but he spent 30 years in prison. Most people convicted of something similar, which was one count, I believe, would have spent 2 to 4, but he spent 30. So it, to me, was not as big a deal that I had this basically courtesy meeting. He wanted to thank me for being nice to him when his wife died. That's pretty much the story.
You advocated for his release when you ran for, I remember it, in 2011, long before he had served 30 years.
He served an extraordinary length of time for the crime that he was convicted of, to which he pled guilty. And it would seem to now be, I think, a matter of goodwill and a good faith gesture for the president to give clemency and release him.
This was the greatest traitor in modern American history who sold our battle plans against the Soviet Union, our main enemy in the Cold War, to the Israeli government, which, according to our Reagan CIA director, Bill Casey, then gave them to the Soviet Union. Why advocate for that guy's release before he serves his full sentence?
Because I had a number of friends that suggested that he had more than served time, and he didn't want to live in the U.S. anymore. He wanted to live in Israel.
So before I get your reaction, Larry, I have this very quick clip of Mike Huckabee suggesting how we should handle the person who was releasing documents to WikiLeaks. This was in 2010.
Whoever in our government leaked that information is guilty of treason. And I think anything less than execution is too kind a penalty.
So, we have somebody releasing information for the benefit of the American people. He's calling for treason. He's calling for execution. Jonathan Pollard, he took a courtesy meeting. He just wanted him out of jail. I mean, what do you make of all this, Larry?
Hey, if you're a Zionist, you get the Zionist get out of jail free card. If you're not, if you're not on the Make Israel Great Again club, they don't want anything to do with you. Look, Pollard was sentenced to life in prison, not 30 years. He was sentenced to life in prison because he spied and betrayed the United States. And so here's Dershowitz trying to make excuses for it. In particular, who tried to make. I debated Alan Dershowitz on this whole issue back in 1998, and so here's Huckabee coming along. Man, yeah, he's going to carry water for the Zionist cause because that's what he is. So it's right that you pointed out that he was reacting to Ed Snowden about wanting to execute someone like Ed Snowden, who didn't betray the United States. He informed the American people that they were being lied to and spied upon. He did the act of a patriot. But, it's just, I learned a long time ago, waiting for moral consistency from a Washington politician, you're better off, you'll find Bigfoot first.
Yeah, but in this case, it's not just the lack of moral consistency that drives me absolutely nuts. It's that Mike Huckabee is a Republican from the South, right? He's supposed to be, America is the greatest country on the face of the planet. We do everything better than everybody else, except when it comes to the state of Israel. Then everything we do is really about even his own ideology around his religion, his Christianity tells him that the Jewish people of Israel should be placed higher in his own hierarchy than himself. I mean, it's just it's an embarrassment that you would have an American ambassador to a country be more loyal to that country than the United States of America.
Yeah, no, that is one of the real problems that Trump has created for himself by surrendering American principles to advocate on behalf of Israel before anything else. And look, it would be one thing if Israel was conducting itself as a productive member of global society with humanity, with justice. And one of the things that, I found, I had to check it out because I heard Tucker say it to Huckabee, and Huckabee claimed to have no knowledge of it. But this shows you what a group of hypocrites these Israeli Zionists are. They claim that the Jews need a homeland. But if you're Jewish by birth, genetically Jewish, you're Ashkenazi, and you convert to Christianity, Israel will not allow you to immigrate because you're no longer considered a Jew. Think about that. So really, what we have is a state that's anti-Christian, that is enabled and facilitated by Zionist Christians. I mean, and the entire thing of Israel and Zionism is so ridiculous in terms of the internal contradictions, because the founder, the big advocate for Zionism was Theodor Herzl. Okay, Herzl was Jewish but not religious at all. He was an atheist, and yet the entire claim, as we saw with Mike Huckabee, the claim that Israel is entitled to this land rests upon a belief that there was a God who said this to Abraham and then to Isaac and Jacob, yeah, this land is yours. So you got the advocate for creating a Zionist state that doesn't even believe in the theological foundation upon which that state exists. You can't get any weirder than that.
Absolutely. Larry, the last question I have for you today is, just looking at everything we've talked about, it seems clear that even the U.S. military doesn't want to go to war with Iran. I think maybe the most important part of that story isn't the U.S. military telling Trump that our weapon stockpiles are low, but that got leaked to the American press. Somebody within the military wants the American people to know that the military command has told Donald Trump that this might not be such a great idea. And we also know that Netanyahu is telling Donald Trump that he has to do it, as well as all the Zionists in America, the Ted Cruzes, the Lindsey Grahams, the Mark Levins, the Mike Huckabees. So who do you think has more influence in Washington? Do we see the U.S. going to war with Iran? Or does the military, and I think this happened previously in maybe like 2006, where it was the commander of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I think it was Admiral Fallon at the time, who basically told Cheney and Bush that we're not going to war with Iran. Does the military stand up and get their way?
Sometimes. In answer to the question, who has the greatest influence with Trump, it's whoever was the last person to talk to him. And that's the danger here. The last person he talked to may have convinced him. The thing I want to potentially remind me if we got it. I've done so many interviews today that's sort of running together, but let's step back and look at the fact that we have an actual real world experiment that we can draw upon to answer the question that if we launch thousands of airstrikes on Iran, will it cause the government to collapse and will we be able to impose our own government? 4 years ago tomorrow, the Russians started a military attack on Ukraine. They called it a special military operation. Since then, they have launched, I would imagine, at least 10,000 missiles. God knows how many bombs dropped from aircraft, and these are huge bombs that can glide in. Not to mention, literally tens of thousands, probably 25,000 drones at a minimum. They have been bombarding Ukraine relentlessly over 4 years. And yet, Ukraine is still, the government's still intact. Their society has not collapsed, even though they've suffered more than a 1.5 million killed in action. And it doesn't make the soldiers on the front line necessarily give up. So in what world of magical thinking, do we believe we can send in a few F-35s over a period of a week or so, and that's going to collapse Iran? We've already, the other benchmark is Yemen. 11 months ago, 11 months ago in March, we launched Operation Rough Rider, and we had 2 aircraft carriers in the Red Sea. We had 4 destroyers. We had 1 cruiser. We had complete control of the air. Nobody could, they weren't shooting us down that way. And in spite of that, after 7 weeks, we failed to open the Red Sea for freedom of navigation, and we failed to destroy all of the Houthis' ballistic missiles. So I ask again, in what world of magical thinking do we believe that right now with one effective aircraft carrier, because the Gerald Ford, don't count that as an attack on Iran, because it's going to be in the Mediterranean trying to protect Israel from Iranian retaliation. So we're going to do more against Iran, who is 9 times the physical size of the Houthis. It's 3 times the physical size of Ukraine. It's got 4.5 times as many people as Ukraine. So we need to sit back and put this all into context to realize this doesn't make sense. But they're still entertaining the possibility of, you got the Lindsey Grahams and others is insisting that Donald Trump has to strike Iran now, strike now.
Absolutely. I really hope that, reality wins the day here and Trump realizes that this isn't going to go well. Unfortunately, I'm worried that the Coots have the presidents here and they are going to drive their point home. But everybody, you can read about all the bad news as it develops on Larry's site, Sonar21. Definitely check it out. And of course, you can find him all over YouTube. He's interviewing with people all day, giving his great insights. And so definitely keep an eye on Larry's work. Larry, thank you so much for your time today.
You're most welcome, Kyle. Thank you.